An abundant mindset is a belief that there is an infinite amount of resources and opportunities available in the world, and that one can create and attract abundance through their thoughts, actions, and intentions. So a lot of people think abundance is spending a lot of money, but that's not necessarily true. Abundance can also just be being responsible about your financial future. Abundance can mean spending money on things you care about, but making sure that you save money on things that aren't as important to you. So for me, abundance is often marked by choice, knowing that you have choice. I could be thinking, I spent so much time on this and it's still not working. Or I could think, I still have years and years to do all of this. I have an infinite amount of options, of time, all of that stuff. So I have a couple of tips about that, about how you can bring more abundance into your life and that don't necessarily have to do with money. Hello, and welcome to Fail to Win, a show where we love to make mistakes and learn from them so you can turn your passion into profits and live life on your own terms. I'm Amy van der Putten from FastForwardAmy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode with simple strategies every Tuesday. Often we ask ourselves why we're not successful yet and why money isn't flowing to us yet and why we're not yet writing a bestseller. And more often than not, it has to do with time and the fact that we have to be patient, but it could also be that not only have we not achieved any of those things, but also that when we look back at a year ago, we're like, I feel like I haven't moved ahead. And then if you look at really successful people, or as I like to call them, the greats, you see that they have made a bunch of progress in the past year. And while it's not always good to compare yourself to others, especially if that makes you sad, it can be good to investigate, like, are you growing the way you want to grow, or have you been blocking yourself a bit? And often when we look at those greats, those are people who are characterized by a lot of positivity, who see a lot of options, and who are always focused on moving forward instead of looking backward or focusing on their fears and worries. And for me, what kind of recaps all of that is that those people are very much living in abundance and working from abundance. They're not letting their fears or their ego guide their decisions. They're actually always choosing abundance over scarcity. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through what I've learned about that, how I perceive that in others, a couple of tips that can help you get to more abundance. And I'll be honest with you, if you're currently feeling like you suck, you fail all the time, and you're not getting ahead, I get that. And a lot of that might actually have to do with the fact that you are acting from scarcity. How do I know that? Well, because earlier today I was crying. And as I then was prepping this episode, I realized, the reason I was crying today, I start so many podcast episodes saying that. By the way, I think crying is a good thing. It's good to just feel your emotions and let them flow through you. I feel much better always after crying. It's a shame they unteach kids to cry because it is a good way to process emotions. But as I was prepping this episode, I was like, oh, I get what happened today. I was paralyzed by fears and worries and a little bit of anxiety. And I was so focused on what's lacking and missing that my brain isn't seeing the positive stuff anymore of what is already there and what I can create even more of and what I've already gotten more of. And I don't see the options and stuff. And I'll be the first to say, you can't always be a super positive person. I know a lot of people who are, but I don't expect that from you and I don't expect that from myself. I think a big problem is also when we expect from ourselves to always be happy. Sometimes we're just allowed to be sad. Last week, I spent an hour in the kitchen ranting throughout dinner and after dinner and just ranting about a bunch of stuff. And I just asked my boyfriend, I just want you to suffer through this. It wasn't about him. It was just me ranting about a bunch of stuff. I was like, I just need to vent. I'm just going to talk about all of this stuff. And he's always just happy that I share my emotions. So that happened. I was negative. Today, I was a crybaby. And tomorrow I'll be fine. And the thing is, it doesn't usually happen as much anymore as it just happened. But there is no use in getting upset about the fact that it happens. This week, I just knew I'm on my period and a bunch of the reasons why I'm crying is just because I'm hormonal. But what I actually wanted to work towards in this episode is that it is a choice to stay there. So we can choose to be there for a bit. It can happen to us. And then it's a choice to stay there. Because when I'm sad about things, I can then say, everything sucks. I'm going to stay in sad, sad land. Or I can choose to be like, I'm going to look at which options I have to improve on this situation. I'm going to look at how I can turn this disadvantage into an advantage and options for the future and opportunities. And that is some of the differences there. A way you could also look at the difference between abundance and scarcity is, for example, abundance could be, for example, when I am happy that my money pays for my groceries. And scarcity could be saying like, oh, these groceries are so expensive. That's just a way of thinking about money. One is being grateful for what the money can do. The other is being sad and annoyed about it. And a few years ago, I actually was in a situation where I thought I was making a decision from scarcity. And my coach and friend Sarah actually helped me discover that it was actually a choice from abundance. So I'm going to walk you through what is abundance and what is scarcity. So what is scarcity? A scarcity mindset is a belief that there is a limited amount of resources or opportunities available in the world. For example, one of the reasons people get jealous is because they see someone doing something and then they think that means I can't, right? There's a limited amount of success, of wealth, of resources. And that one must compete and struggle to secure their share of those resources. It is characterized by feelings of fear, worry, and anxiety about not having enough, and the focus on what is lacking or missing. And when I read that, I was like, ugh, this is me today. I'm like, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good, this sucks. Ugh. That's a scarcity mindset. Whereas an abundance mindset is, on the other hand, an abundant mindset is a belief that there is an infinite amount of resources and opportunities available in the world, and that one can create and attract abundance through their thoughts, actions, and intentions. It is characterized by feelings of gratitude, joy, and possibility, and the focus on what is present and available. Luckily, when I was sad earlier today, I identified I can fix this, and I'm going to look at what options I have to fix this. So I journaled a bit. I asked some people for help because I know I am surrounded by help. That is an abundant reaction, is thinking I am not alone, I have support. A scarcity reaction could have been, I'm all alone, I need to fix this all by myself. I'm going to crawl into a hole of like self-pity. So that's also a choice. So for me, abundance is often marked by choice, knowing that you have choice. I could be thinking, I spent so much time on this and it's still not working. Or I could think, I still have years and years to do all of this. I have an infinite amount of options, of time, all of that stuff. So back to that difference between abundance and scarcity. A few years ago, I was driving a car that was a really crappy car. So at a certain point, the mirror fell off. I didn't have the money to have it fixed. So I went to buy duct tape. And I just duct taped it together, and the sides were just scraped off. And at the time, I was actually working with fairly wealthy people. And I was making some money. I was making just enough money that I could have bought a newer car that would have reflected my persona better. But at the time, I was like, am I going to spend my hard-earned money on a new car? This is many years ago. And I felt like I had to, because I'm like, what kind of representation of who I am is this if I just show up to my wealthy client's doorstep with a really crappy car? And I was in serious self-doubt because I was like, that's not abundant. That's like keeping myself small. And then my coach Sarah said, what if this is an abundant choice? Because it does reflect a different part of who you are, namely a very responsible person. And that gave me so much peace of mind. I was like, yes, that is true, because that is very abundantly aligned with who I am, is that I am prioritizing my financial peace and future over, the fact that might not look as successful or as put together as I would have wanted to. And I let the one thing take precedence over something else. And this might be a little bit of a weird definition, but this is something I've never talked about before. I think if you struggle identifying what is abundance versus scarcity, sometimes it also just means like, who are you to like down to your core? And are you actually making decisions from there in alignment? Or are you making decisions from what people think you should be doing? So a lot of people think abundance is spending a lot of money, but that's not necessarily true. Abundance can also just be being responsible about your financial future. Abundance can mean spending money on things you care about, but making sure that you save money on things that aren't as important to you. More on that, by the way, in the next 2 episodes. So I believe that the shift from scarcity to abundance is a really important one, because people often expect to create a lot of positivity from a place of negativity. But like, look at me earlier today, my many emotions. I can then feel myself becoming really grumpy, kind of like when you're a very hangry bear. And I can feel myself getting grumpy then. And then I can feel myself like trying to seize control. But when you are in that negative state of mind, it would be like a child who is like anxiously gripping something and squeezing with their fists. And let's imagine that you have sand in your palm and you squeeze the fist. The sand is going to run out of it. Whereas if you hold it open, the sand is going to stay there. So sometimes the tighter we squeeze and the more we try to control the negative things, we try to hold on, the more we're going to squeeze everything out. So that's what I feel sometimes. Sometimes I'm incredibly frustrated with my team. They're in the room with me. They know this. They saw me cry. And I can feel it when I go into that scarcity person versus that solution options oriented person. And in the beginning, it was really difficult to identify that. I was really not a fun boss in the beginning. And you might be listening like, oh, Amy, didn't expect that. Or yes, I did expect that because you're a brute. But I don't think many people actually know how difficult it is when you are used to working by yourself and then all of a sudden you become other people's boss and then turns out they don't do things exactly the way you want them to. It's very weird in your brain. Because as an entrepreneur, let's be honest, you have a lot of ego. Because otherwise you also wouldn't be doing this, especially as a personal brand. So I'm fully aware of that fact and I've let go of a lot of that. Letting go of all of your ego is, by the way, not necessary either. But I did notice, like, when I squeeze so much, I'm going to squeeze the life out of everything. So I need to stay in abundance and look at what options do we have to fix these situations. So abundance always comes back to not squeezing the life out of it, but options, choices, moving forward, positivity. And it can be really difficult to create a positive environment from a squeezy negative mindset. So that's the one thing is, if you look at those really frustrating moments, when you let fear dominate your brain, it's really going to paralyze the rest of your brain and you won't be able to think in terms of options. I think it's a really primal reaction, actually. I don't know about all of the different things, but I think when you are very afraid, something gets like paralyzed in the frontal cortex of your brain, which clouds your thinking, and it especially clouds your creativity. So if you want solutions for your problems, you're not going to get there if you're like, I'm an angry, fearful bear. Okay, so we need more abundance. And we got to know that from a positive mindset or from a neutral mindset, we can create positive stuff. But if we get into conversations or situations with a negative mindset, we're going to be exuding that. We're not going to find more solutions. So I have a couple of tips about that, about how you can bring more abundance into your life, and that don't necessarily have to do with money. So the first rule, I think, is, or the first thing I try to look at is, instead of thinking can't and not and negative words, like identify them in your language, look at how can I create more of things? Which other options are there? So instead of can't, not, won't, think of more, other options, stuff like that, solutions. So that's a languaging thing to just pay attention to. What could help is if you write down your thoughts, like what is truly bothering me, you write it out, and then you look at your sentences and you'll probably notice that you are saying the same things over and over again. For me, earlier this week, when I was brainstorming about my limiting beliefs, I noticed that I was saying I can't a lot. I can't do this. This is not going to work. I don't believe that that's going to work. And I saw that I was struggling with my own self-worth, actually, and spoiler, a part of that had to do with my period, and a part of that has to do with my childhood, like everyone's triggers, and then some other stuff. The reason I talk about that, this is all very awkward, but usually no one talks about this. Like, you see other people on Instagram, you're like, everyone is doing so well, no one doubts themselves, la la la. And it is a very thin line. I can't overshare about stuff like this because then people will think she doesn't have any shit together. But I actually do have my shit together. It's because I sometimes have those moments that I learn and that I can grow and that I can tackle new challenges. So if you're feeling like this sometimes, like you're like negative or whatever, that's okay. That's actually very, very human. And that's a sign that you can still grow as a person. Wouldn't life be boring if you had nothing left to learn? I think it would be boring. I'm ready for a month of feeling like that, though. So what was I saying? Focus on more. So identify your own language and look at what you are saying. I can't or I choose to. So what I did with the car back then, and what a lot of people say with money, is I can't afford that. You can switch that up in your language into I choose to save my money. Or I can't do that could be transformed into a mantra you tell yourself, or you tell yourself, I can learn anything. So that's one of the things I've done this week. I'm like, maybe I can't just yet, but I can learn anything. And I keep telling myself, I can learn anything I want. I can do anything I want. I can achieve anything I set my mind to. So those are mantras I repeat. So step 1, languaging. Do you have a scarcity language in your brain or an abundant language in your brain? Write down how you're feeling, journal, and use maybe like a red pen or something to identify the negative thoughts, and realize that 85% of the time, I read this somewhere, I don't know if it's correct, 85% of the time your brain consists of the same things happening. So the same sentences, the same thoughts. So if all of those are negative, it's going to make sense that you're in this little dumpster situation with yourself. So if we can change those around to like catch them, be like, nope, I'm going to turn this into a positive sentence, already we're going to feel much more abundant. The second thing could be to change your environment. So if you have very toxic friends, for example, that's something you could change. But the same goes for the clutter in your house. So maybe you're thinking of, when I buy a new apartment, my life is going to be perfect. We've all been there, me especially. I'm like, when I do this new thing, when I go there, I'm gonna have such a pretty bedroom. But how about you try to make the best of what you have right now? How about you clean up your living room right now, although you're not living in the house of your dreams? Just by already changing your environment you're currently in, you're going to invite more abundance into your life. And this could also be to kind of limit your, I know a lot of people are like, but how do you break up with friends? But limit your interactions about negativity. So stop gossiping about people. If someone says a lot of negative stuff about other people, don't go into those conversations. Stop yourself when you talk about how your day was. You can vent. I ranted an hour, remember? But if you're always focused on the negative stuff, more negative stuff is going to happen and people are going to talk to you about negative stuff. And then we're back in the languaging part. So a little trick I do to do that is at the end of the day, I ask my boyfriend, what was the best part of your day? And he asks me back. He never asks me first. I'm the one who thinks about it. And then I used to do that with my plus kids because I wanted to invite them to, at the end of the day, focus on the positive. So they went to bed with positive thoughts in their brain. This is something that we can do to ourselves as well. So what's been going well? What went well this morning? If you're feeling a bit low right now, you're listening to this, okay, what was your favorite part of yesterday? What are you really proud of that you did today? Like, asking yourself those positive questions can also help to shape your language and your environment. So first we talked about your language, choices, options, opportunities, more instead of less. Second is your environment and the people in it, cleaning up your place, even though it's not your dream apartment yet. You know, paint that one wall, although you'll have to paint over it next year when you move out of the rental. It's okay. For the time being, you're going to really love having that wall painted in your favorite color. And then last but not least, I think it's all about envisioning your abundant life and who you are in that. Is the person in your most abundant life the person you are today? If not, can you behave more like that person? Because the only way you're going to get there is if you start behaving like that abundant person. I have so much more I can say about this. Abundance has to do with money, but it's not just about money. You know, we already talked about it. It's about seeing opportunities, taking advantage of them, and really looking at life and your being as something infinite, where there are infinite choices, resources, all of that. And this actually also goes for relationships. Maybe, like, I was once in a situation where I didn't want to get out of a relationship because I was afraid that this was as good as it was going to get. Scarcity would keep you in a relationship, or would have kept me in that relationship. Abundance and thinking in an abundant way promised me that there was better for me out there. I'm not saying that as a piece of advice. I'm just saying, like, this is how I try to shift my mindset from scarcity to positivity or abundance. And again, you can be sad. You can have all the feels. I think we definitely need to feel our feelings more. So cry, vent, kickbox, do all of the things. And then think about, once you have the choice, can I choose to redirect my brain to positivity, to abundance, to more, instead of focusing on less? Start doing this with little things like the sentences you tell yourself, like not gossiping and stuff like that, and you're going to feel that shift to more abundance.